Imagine, Episode 15, by Bernard King and Nicholas Lumarine. Jemma is in hospital. Is she ill, or was she put there? Because Nicholas is killing off the woman in his book. Mrs. Lumarine's calendar was in disarray, he was told. 3 days ago, she had been admitted to hospital and all her commitments were cancelled. Bang, 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 bang. Nicholas had selected his killer. He had gone mental. He had attacked his wife. Everyone was becoming a prisoner of the book. Bang, 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 bang. The four thoughts jumped upon him as one, flattening him into shock. Unnoticed, the charity lady's tinny voice in the telephone earpiece was replaced by the burr of disconnection. She was in hospital, so she was not dead. What state was she in? Had Nicholas been arrested? What had the author written? His dead-end questions multiplied, a leering pile on his mantelpiece of thoughts. Rattling down the telephone, he stared at it for 5 minutes. How could a security guard find a woman he was not related to in one of the dozens of hospitals in London? The answer was simple. He could not. The suspicious response to his half-hearted attempts on the telephone to the 2 hospitals near her flat established that. The next week was long. Twice he called her from the office telephone. It was nice to hear her voice, even though it was her answer phone. He was drifting. Jemma had entered his life and wrecked his routines. Now she was no longer around. He felt like a table tennis ball that had lost its table and was bouncing aimlessly around on the floor. He scanned the newspapers on the internet, especially the gossip and celebrity columns. The Lumarines, neither Mr. or Mrs. were mentioned. This, he reasoned, was good. If something had happened to her with the fame of her husband, most reporters would find a few newsworthy columns. Jemma was not a great tweeter, 2 or 3 a week, but for 10 days her followers had had nothing to read. He considered going around to her flat, trying a few questions on the neighbours or tradesmen. But Berkeley Square is not your average neighbourhood. It would be most unlikely there would be loose talk. Not only are there no gardens or garden fences to chat over, CEOs, MPs, millionaires, and the rich and famous hardly have time to live, let alone chat. As far as Jemma's life was concerned, he did not exist, so he decided to keep it that way. Stopping all inquiries, he did the only thing left. He waited. Mr. Archer? Mr. Jerome Archer? Jerome froze. His doorbell had rung, and the welcoming smile he had ready for Jemma as he threw open the door froze with him. Fighting for control, the most he could do was give a silent nod. His guns. They had discovered his guns. That could be the only reason for their visit. May we come in? The 2 policemen followed his indication into the sitting room. He did not like the way one glanced up the stairs as they passed. They stood, a circle of 3, both of the officers looking at him steadily. There was no document in their hands, a plus for Jerome. To get upstairs, they would have to have a search warrant. We should sit. The officer who had spoken took his own advice and sank onto a chair. His companion followed. Wonderingly, Jerome slowly sat opposite them. I am afraid we have not come with good news. Thank God, it wasn't his guns. By now they would be charging upstairs. It was Jemma. Something had happened to Jemma. The panic kicking his reason to bits paused, allowing a split second of sanity. No, not Jemma. He could not be connected to Jemma. The policeman paused, took a deep breath, and looked down. I'm afraid it's your wife, Mr. Archer. Jennifer. What the hell has she done now? The tension eased. He could handle Jennifer. She has been killed. Jerome blinked, waiting for the slam of emotion. There wasn't one. The news bounced off him as if he was a rock. The constables looked at each other. The widowed husband, staring at them with total unconcern, was not the usual scene. "Okay, thank you for letting me know." Jerome stood up, followed hesitating by the policeman. His walk to the door was stopped by a discreet cough. "We have to ask you to identify the body." Embarrassment carried the policeman's words to Jerome. A nod, and Jerome's move nearer the door was the only reaction that he got. At the front door, the constable gave Jerome an envelope. "Everything you need to make an appointment." Jerome offered another nod. "It was a hit and run. We're looking for the driver." It was the first time the second policeman had spoken. Jerome's nods this time were 6 before they tailed off into viewable silence. Gently he closed the door and watched the constables walk down the garden path. He had not said a word during the meeting deliberately. He did not want the coppers chanting their script of condolence, as they no doubt had been trained to do, because the sooner the law was out of breathing distance of his guns and out of his house, the better. So Jennifer had been run over and the driver had not stopped. Did he feel sad? No. Was he pleased she was dead? No. After what she had done to him, he did not give a damn. She had probably been killed by one of her lemons, and his only real surprise was that it had not happened sooner. The funeral, the forms, and the investigations would be a drag, but apparently, as he was her next of kin, there was no escape. But he would not play the bereaved husband. Everyone would know what she had done to him. Yes, that's the bitch. That's Jennifer Archer. Detective Inspector Casewell's jaw dropped. In 20 years in the police, he had never seen a reaction so vicious. Jerome Archer had hardly glanced at his wife's body before walking out of the room. It took a hard tug on his arm to stop him walking out of the mortuary. There were forms to fill in and sign, and also he wanted a quiet chat to the obviously unbereaved husband. Jerome had not uttered a word throughout the administration work. Okay, the guy's wife must have given him a hard time, and from the background investigations, she seemed to have had many male companions. Not an ideal scenario for a happy marriage. It had become obvious the hit and run had been no accident. Jennifer Archer had been murdered. 2 witnesses had described how the car seemed to have been waiting until she came out of the hotel. The car was started, it mounted the pavement between the 2 lampposts, ran her down, and returned to the road just before the next lamppost with impeccable timing. It was considered to be a professional hit. But it was just a formality, but he had to ask. "Where were you yesterday afternoon at 3:30, Mr. Archer?" "At work." Ha! The inspector smiled to himself. He had managed to get 2 words out of the husband. "And what make and colour car do you own?" The inspector knew already, but he needed the facts uttered by Jerome. Otherwise they could not be put on a form and signed for as fact. Jennifer did not appear to have a fixed address. Her belongings and whatever the police could find would be delivered to him in due course, Jerome was informed. His silent nod to the inspector as he left gave the inspector a total of 5 words for his visit. Why? Did Jerome have something to hide? Detective Inspector Casewell decided that for the moment his list of suspects would remain unchanged. It was a rather short list containing just one name, Jerome Archer. Jerome decided he would not attend Jennifer's funeral. Hypocrisy was one of his pet hates, and he considered he would be a hypocrite if he passed through the cemetery gates with any expression that could only be false. As the surprise of Jennifer's death and the annoyance of the administration demands faded, he realized it had been 10 days since Jemma had been taken to hospital. What was happening? Even if she had had an operation, she could phone him. But perhaps she was in intensive care, or too ill to pick up a telephone, or his walk from the bus stop allowed his imagination to spawn horror stories. He had just reached his turning when the curtain suddenly descended on his concert of trepidation. His left elbow was levered away from his body, A hand slid in. So, where do we go now? Before he could turn, his heart had already wrenched to a painful hammering inside his chest. Jemma! The surprise and the delight chased each other across his face. Her hand burrowed further along his sleeve to clasp his. For the moment he could not speak, his mouth too wide in a smile. The questions were queuing again, but her expression stopped everything. She was white-faced. Okay, she had been in hospital, but the line of her mouth added a stress that boded fear. Her look, when she turned towards him, was lit with terror. What on earth's wrong? The question had not been in the queue, but had burst out in what was now his panic. She shook her head. In the house, she whispered. Twice she turned, pausing and scanning the street behind, and twice their eyes locked. This was not Jemma. This was a very frightened woman walking beside him. Give me your key. Awkwardly, he fumbled his key wallet out of his pocket. Watch. Wait until I've been inside for 5 minutes. She fiddled with his unaccustomed door lock. I might have been followed. The street was empty, but still he pottered with some bushes in front of his garden, glancing both ways for signs of life. What he was supposed to do if a follower appeared, he had no idea. The street remained deserted as the hand of his watch passed her demanded time. With a deep breath he turned, walked down the path, and opened his front door. The attack was full frontal. Her body hit him as she flew forward. Together they crashed backwards, a breath-thudding smack on the hall wall, a sharp crack as his head whiplashed back, and nails clawing and pulling on the back of his neck. Hold me, for God's sake, hold me, she screamed. His arms locked around her in both defense and attack, holding her close to stop the scratching and holding her closer because he needed to. She was sobbing. Her weight was dragging him down. 2 tangled rag dolls slid to the floor and stayed there. He watched the light change from daylight to street light through the hall window. Several times he tried to move, but each attempt was stopped. Her hands pulled him back as she cuddled even closer. We have to do something. Her whisper opened his eyes. Her weight was easing across his legs. They staggered up, supporting each other into the kitchen. We must do something, she repeated. Gently, he sat her down, set 2 tumblers on the table, and took a bottle of whiskey from the kitchen cabinet. When he turned to pour out the drink, a sheet of paper had appeared on the table. Read it, Jerome. It was an analysis of a bottle of red wine. Jerome's knowledge of red wine was just about limited to how to drink it. But one word bit: aconite. The only word he could recognize amongst the technical jargon. Aconite was a poison. Aconite was not usual in wine. I only drank a little, she said. Jerome passed her a tumbler of whiskey. Her stare at the drink was hard and brief before she pushed it away. He tried to poison me. She was calm, coldly calm. I managed to get to hospital. Her expression had changed. She was watching him as he sipped his whiskey. Looking up, he received eyes loaded with trepidation, as if she was going to tell him something momentous. I was ready. That's why I survived. Ready? Ready to be poisoned? Jerome was losing the plot. It was in his book. The girl was poisoned. She got up and came around the table, forcing herself onto his lap. Hold me, Jerome. I feel safe when you hold me. They went to bed and tunneled under the bedclothes. He wrapped himself around her, protecting her from the nasties and naughties and novels and Nicholas. Things always seemed better in the mornings, but the cliché was not working today. He left Jemma sleeping and absently made some breakfast. First off, she had spent the night with him. Nicholas would go Trident. Secondly, she could not go home to a husband who was trying to kill her. Thirdly, if she did not go home, Nicholas or the police would start looking. No, things did not seem better in the mornings. The tang of coffee brought her downstairs. 2 cups and the toast and marmalade helped fade the night thoughts a little. She had come straight from the hospital to him. Nicholas would believe she was still in her luxury ward, surrounded by flowers. He had sent huge bouquets every day, a gesture, she explained, to make him appear loving and caring. Should any journalist think an international best-selling author's wife arriving in Casualty in the middle of the night was worth a few lines? In the 4 days she was under observation after treatment, he never visited or telephoned. "Why didn't you call the police?" he asked. "Yes." She took another bite on the toast. He had to wait until it had toured her mouth twice before she swallowed. "I should have." "The hospital saw the analysis, saw the poison. Didn't they do anything?" She shook blonde tresses across the pajama top he had given her. "They never saw the report. I kept the bottle in my bedside table and had the wine tested yesterday." "But you could have him arrested," said Jerome. "I could have," she replied. Jerome poured them both a third cup of coffee. From her tone, it was obvious Jemma was thinking along a very different route. "Having Nicholas arrested would complicate matters for us. What is going on we do not know, but while Nicholas is around, it is not going to stop." Gemma's very different route was suddenly becoming apparent. She looked at him over the rim of a coffee cup as she sipped. He must be stopped from writing. It had been his suggestion. Now she was taking it up. Jerome did not need to be told. What Jemma was suggesting was more than an open book. I would be free. We could plan a future together. She was offering him a new life with the woman he loved, free of complications, and it was still only breakfast. He took her hand. There were things to do. First, someone had to die. For Jerome, there was no question of choice. He did not remember taking a deep breath, pulsing perspiration, or any of the symptoms of someone gripped by deep stress. "I'll kill him." The sentence was simple, straight, and honest. Jemma could have put her hand up to her mouth in shock. She could have gasped with surprise or gaped astonishment. But there were no dramatics. She gently shook her head. "No, Jerome." She took his hand. "I will not take any risks with you." She could hire a hitman, bring him in from abroad, and fly him straight out after the job was completed. There would be no connection with them. Nothing could go wrong. Jerome would have laughed had the discussion not been so serious. Worldly Jemma was suddenly out of character. "You have never killed before." It was not a question, but a statement. Jemma shook her head. It was easy to kill, but the moment the crime was committed, many things happened. DNA, forensic evidence, the manner of death, time of death, medical evidence, plus a dozen other morsels of information, all helping to defeat the perfect crime. Naive Jemma had already made a basic mistake. She had to find a hitman, get him close to her husband, trust that he knew his job, and finally, and most importantly, ensure he kept his mouth shut. All tasks that left her open to blackmail. The more people involved in a crime, the more were the chances of problems. "I will do it," he said. He was good at killing people. He'd been well paid for 20 years for doing so. He was unknown to Nicholas, Nicholas's family and friends. There was no way he could be suspected of the murder. His passion for crime novels had armed him with a comprehensive knowledge of the complexities of police procedure. His marksmanship was flawless, and his planning was impeccable. Jemma watched him unblinkingly as he offered his CV. His credentials had the desired effect. "I shall worry," she said. She was now blinking uncomfortably. For God's sake, she took his hand. "Be careful." It was all acceptance. Jemma had agreed he should kill her husband. "Of course you'll stay here." His assumption was immediately corrected by the shake of her head and her calling for a hire car. "I shall not come here again." She was already plotting, way ahead of him as usual. They could not afford to be connected, before or after the event. He must not phone her on his portable. Calls could be traced. In future, they would only use landlines and never leave messages on answer phones. She would not go back to her flat. She had phoned Nicholas from the hospital, a blurted excuse that she needed a few days of country quiet before she returned to the cacophony of London. She would go straight to her sister's in Wiltshire. She did not mention Nicholas again. He realised she had put her husband's fate on simmer until she returned to London, so the subject had been dropped. Jerome watched as she prepared to leave, fussing about the way her jeans presented her bottom, worrying about her lack of makeup, and kissing him goodbye with what could have been a smile of happiness. He closed the door after her, quite bewildered. He was thinking of murder. He was thinking of shooting. He was thinking of sniping. She was saying goodbye, thinking about her sister and a rest in the country as if nothing had happened. So, he had discovered another of Gemma's talents. She was double glazed and insulated from the rest of the population. But the business in hand required planning. It would be a long-distance hit. The further he was away from his target, the safer he would be. He could, under the right conditions, take out a target at 2,000 yards. Nicholas and anyone near him would not know what had hit him. It would be quick, easy, and safe. But his armory would be of no use. He was a collector of pistols, handguns that could only handle yards times 10. The only long-distance weapon in his armory was the Bren gun. Thoughtfully, he went through his security routine for his armor-plated den before slowly pushing open the door. Although one person could carry the Bren gun, it was designed to be fired by 2 people, one actually shooting while the second changed magazines and barrels. It would only need 1 shot, so the barrel would not overheat, and a magazine would not be necessary. 1 person would be enough. But there would be evidence. A Bren was a unique weapon. Police ballistics would know the bullet had come from such a weapon. It was most likely there would be very few Bren guns in private hands. Although no one except Charlie knew of his collection, he had no illusions about his supplier. If the heat was turned on, Charlie would melt and lead the police his way. It was a slight chance, but many perfect murders had been ruined by a slight chance. With regret, he had to dispose of using any of the firepower from his armory. Jemma would have to invest in a sniper's rifle. That could be another problem. Sniper's rifles could also be traced. His turn towards the door was halted. The symmetry of his collection was not perfect. A shiny green oval was beckoning. Gregory was leaning slightly out of true. Gregory was Jerome's grenade. A grenade exploding leaves nothing. No DNA, no fingerprints, no bullets to trace. Just death, shrapnel, and debris. The perfect weapon for Jerome. In the next episode of Imagine.